Resident Producers Program. The program content is the sole responsibility of the producer and does not necessarily reflect the views or policies of CATV2, Oshkosh Community Access Television, the City of Oshkosh, the Oshkosh Cable Television Advisory Commission, or Time Warner Cable.
Hi everyone, welcome to another edition of Eye on Oshkosh. I'm Cheryl Hentz, along with my guest co-host on this edition, Mr. Miles Maguire, who I'm sure most of you are very familiar with. You're also very familiar with one of our guests this evening, and that is Tony Palmeri. He's on the other side of the table tonight, and on the other side of the questions. That's because Tony is one of 8 candidates seeking a seat on the City Council. There are 3 seats up for re-election, one held by Brian Bain, one held by Meredith Shireman, and one being vacated by Shirley Maddox. Now, Brian and Meredith are both seeking re-election. Shirley, of course, announced a few months back that she would not be. There is a primary because of the number of candidates. That primary will be held on Tuesday, February 20th. In that race, 1 will be elected. Eliminated, and 7 will move on to the general election, which is held on Tuesday, April 3rd. So with all of that, Tony, welcome to the show, and how does it feel sitting over there?
Strange. Strange, but I know how fair you both are. So
that's right.
Looking forward to it.
Well, I should say right up front that Bob Cornell will be joining us in the second half of this show, and I will also disclose that I have worked with both Tony and Bob in various capacities for a number of years. I also circulated nomination papers for both of them, and very proud to have done so, but that does not mean that I'm not going to be fair to all the other candidates who are running. So, or that I'll be any easier on Tony or Bob. So that being said, why don't we start out with you telling everyone a little bit about yourself and why you're running for City Council.
As most viewers of Eye on Oshkosh know, I am an associate professor of communication at UW Oshkosh. I have lived in this community since 1989, teaching at the university. I've run for office twice before, for the State Assembly, once in 1996 and once in 2004. I've been, I guess, what you'd call a media activist, co-hosting this show with you, of course, doing commentary at UW Oshkosh, radio commentary. I write a monthly column for the Valley Scene called Media Rants. I speak quite often at the Common Council, and I think I have a fairly good grasp of most of the important issues facing the community. The reason why I'm running, Cheryl and Miles, is because, like many citizens in this community, I've had enough. On this show especially, we get to learn lots about the issues, and I've been very, very dissatisfied with the responses that we're getting from City Hall to almost every issue. And I think the turning point for me was the 5 Rivers Resort deal. I thought it was handled with a combination of incompetence and arrogance that just left me very disappointed in the way the city is run. And I will tell you that the main message of my campaign is that we need to start expecting higher standards of performance and accountability from all levels of city government. Higher standards of performance and accountability. I'm talking about the council, I'm talking about the city manager, I'm talking about the department heads, I'm talking about everyone that runs this city. We need to start restoring some trust in government here.
Well, let's start with the council, if I can interrupt and say, what would you expect the council to do differently?
I think the council needs to push the city manager to be more involved in development issues, especially economic development, and to be involved in everything else affecting the city. My understanding was last year the main thing the council expected from the manager was to come up with a new website for the city of Oshkosh, which I'm sure he farmed out to some employee. We need to do more than that. I'm tired of opening up the newspaper and have development ideas announced by a department head. It's time to, in this form of government, council manager, as a practical matter, your manager has to lead. And the council needs to push the manager to do that. And if he can't do it, it's time to start looking elsewhere.
So that would be one of your primary objectives or goals that you would set forth if you were on the council, because every year, you know, the council, as you well know, sets forth goals and expectations for the city manager for the coming year. And that would be one of your goals then?
I want to say, first of all, I like Mr. Wolank. I think Dick Wolank is a good guy. I think he's got a good heart. I think he loves this city. However, over the last 3, 4, 5 years, it has seemed that on major projects facing this issue, the city, he seems to be missing in action. I want to see, when a major development idea is coming across the city, I want the city manager to lead on that. How can we possibly get public buy-in to major projects if the manager is not out in front on that? And so what I think the council needs to do, and I will lead this as a council member, is say to Mr. Wolank, you've got 1 year to show some leadership on development and other crucial issues facing this town. And if he can't do it, it is time to start looking maybe to replace the city manager. I'm not going in with the attitude we need to replace the city manager. I think the council needs to do more to put him in a position to show what he can do. And I don't think this council has done that.
Well, that's certainly a good goal, and I would applaud that kind of a goal coming from City Council. What other goals do you think should be set for the city manager?
Well, as I said in the opening statement, higher standards of performance and accountability. One needs to deal with open government. I thought it was a darn shame that people like you and me had to go to the Attorney General in Madison to ask if the city was running its meetings properly. Your city manager needs to be a watchdog on things like that. He needs to be as well versed on state statutes, open government issues specifically, as anyone else up there. We've seen that the city attorney, I think, has been disappointing in these areas. So I want the manager to take a lead on issues like that. I want the manager to be more public in his evaluation of department heads, parks, planning. I want the manager to be more vocal and more visible in what he thinks needs to be done in these areas. He obviously is a full-time employee making a very good salary. I don't think it's unreasonable to find out what he thinks as a citizen. So those are some of the goals that I would set for the manager.
Okay.
But I mean, part of the problem, though, is the way things are set up. And I think that he would argue that I do what the council tells me to do. And the council is not giving me a lot of direction. So I'm interested in what you said about making the council more accountable. Is there, and you mentioned in the statement that you published on your blog about developing a vision for the city. I mean, do you have a vision for the city that you would like the rest of the council to pick up on?
Well, you know, visions are always things in progress. But let me say this: if you were to come up with a statement on what would be some ideal characteristics for a location that could be an ideal city, you'd say, well, water, a river, a university, independent media. We've got all the qualities in this city that could lead us to greatness. But what seems to be happening is the city administration and the council seem always to be in what I call crisis management mode. So that we get to a point where all of a sudden we find out we need a garbage fee. Which is, why did we even get to that point? That seems to be a council and a manager that just is not forward looking. Part of the vision has to be, and I am, as everyone knows, I am a university professor, we need to start making more use of what I'll call the brain trust at the campus. You and I have interviewed people like Dr. Michael Buridi, Urban Affairs at UW-Oshkosh. He claims the city never approaches him for ideas. How can you have a university that has a public administration program and not use that program to help develop your vision for a city to help you develop ways of doing things better. So we've got, Miles, we've got, I think, all the qualities here to be a great 21st century city. The crisis management mode doesn't allow us to do that.
I think part of the problem is that the council is part-time and the staff is full-time. And one thing that I observed is that the staff always knows lots more. And the council members, honestly, I think, ask kind of elemental questions, like they don't really know what's going on. The question that I have in my mind about candidates, or two candidates, is how much time, at a minimum, and I don't want you to say I'm going to put in whatever time is necessary, but how much time at a minimum are you committed or willing to commit week in, week out to make sure that you understand the issues so that you're not asking the basic questions, but that you can actually say to staff, look, we've already thought about that, do this instead of that?
I'm planning on dedicating a substantial amount of time to the Common Council position. Now, I can't quantify that in exact number of hours per day or per week, but I will say this: working on Oshkosh and other independent media has given me the training to be able to do this. I fancy myself as somewhat of a watchdog and as somewhat of a muckraker. I think we need muckrakers and watchdogs on that council. So I don't perceive, Miles, that what I'll be doing on that council is much different than what I have been doing as a citizen in my watchdog role. The big difference is I'll have a vote, and I'll have more access to information as a member of the council. But I've shown people in this community, I think I'm well known as someone who's a hard worker, and I will devote the hours necessary to do the job properly. Because quite frankly, when we are at-large counselors, we represent the entire city. When someone calls you as a counselor, they need to know you're going to put the time in to do the job. I think everything in my background suggests, A, I'm a person who answers phone calls, and B, I'm a person who puts the time in. So I'm looking forward to doing that.
Tony, you'd mentioned earlier Five Rivers, and of course we couldn't have a council candidate discussion without bringing up Five Rivers. So, while it was certainly magnificent in design and hope, it didn't happen, as we all know, and it didn't happen in part because the developer couldn't meet the terms of the term sheet that had been given to him not once but twice. It also fell apart because of the city and the way it handled things. It was mismanaged, I think, from start to finish. Now we've got a group that wants to do something with the waterfront. They're apparently talking to folks. We've got a healthcare firm, we've got a bank, we've got a grocery store that have already expressed interest. The developers and interested businesses have until mid-July now to put together some plans to present to the city. And as of this taping, that will be going to the council Tuesday night. I think it's probably safe to assume that'll be approved. We've already heard, though, from the potential developers that an extension might be necessary come July.
Here we go again.
It's a big project, and 6 months, I don't know. I don't know if that's reasonable or not, but as a candidate for the council, if you were elected and the developer then came forward and said, we do need an extension, and gave you plausible reason why an extension would be in order, would you be amenable to that, or?
Yes, I think councilors always have to be amenable to extensions as long as it's not going to cost taxpayers any more money in the process. But Cheryl, what I'm most disappointed by is the way some ideas for the riverfront were not even considered. I was a big supporter of something called the Living Learning Community that Chancellor Wells at UW-Oshkosh had thrown out. It was immediately shot down as too costly, we'll never have the money, before anyone even looked at it. This gets to vision again. The problem I have with so much of development in Oshkosh, Cheryl, is it seems to be based on what can the planning department get accomplished rather than what do the people want or need. What's been missing in development in this community is small d democracy. What do the people want? Now, with Five Rivers, I did not meet one person in this entire city who wanted luxury condos there, especially with condos going up where the Pioneer is. There never seemed to be any real visible desire for that project. For this new development being talked about, I would like to see more information before saying yes, it's a good development or not. But I still haven't given up hope on the living learning community. There are other cities in this country that do that kind of thing. We have the population for it. And I think before shooting down an idea, at least let's look into it and find out whether it is feasible.
For viewers who may not know what that is, what exactly is it, and do you recall offhand how much it was going to cost?
I don't recall the numbers offhand, because I don't think we were even to that point of talking about numbers.
So how could they have said it's going to cost too much money?
Well, Miles may know more about this than I do.
I don't remember the specifics. It seemed like the idea came up, and I don't know that there were a lot of specifics attached to it. It was more sort of a concept. But there were some architectural sketches of things going.
So that would have cost too much money, but a $64 million resort wouldn't?
Exactly.
Okay, all right.
A living learning community is basically designed for a population that is not necessarily going to the university, but has some connection to it. It's a walkable community. It's got a combination of affordable housing, retail shopping, food choices, and so on. It's basic, almost like you could describe it as a city within a city. But it adds tremendously to a tax base. It keeps people downtown, which is what I find very appealing about it. But again, absent leadership from the administrative levels in the city, things like this don't even get looked at. And as a counselor, I will make demands that ideas do get investigated and looked at.
Well, maybe that's something that Access, which is one of the developers involved in this possible project, could take a look at.
Sure.
There's also some discussion that's been held. I don't know to what degree, but there has been some, at least minimal, discussion held about Oshkosh Truck perhaps building some corporate offices along the riverfront. How do you feel about that?
That would not be my first choice for that area. I mean, when you've got a riverfront area where so much activity can be done, I mean, I'd like to leave that open for the people. That should be the people's area. Nothing against Oshkosh Truck. They do wonderful things for the community, especially providing employment, some good paying jobs. But it just seems to me in that part of the city, that could be such a magnet for tourists and for people in the city to go and enjoy. I thought Mr. Esslinger's idea from a few years ago to have it as a kind of Bay Beach type of area, as they used to have in Green Bay, is something worth looking at. Or something like a real bona fide river walk, somewhat like what they have in San Antonio, Texas. Obviously not to that level, but something like that. Why can't Oshkosh have the great restaurants, the great shops? Why can't that riverfront be a bustling place that would be occupied for many hours of the day? That should be part of our vision. We've got this wonderful riverfront, and it just seems to me to be content with a corporate office building. That just doesn't cut it.
Yeah, except the one advantage of a corporate office building is that it's going to be taxed at very high levels, so it's going to generate more revenues for the city.
And it would keep the corporate office here.
Right.
And they certainly wouldn't need the whole riverfront.
Exactly.
So, I mean, maybe there's a way to sort of get a lot of this stuff along there.
Yeah. But again, this is where you need, as a practical matter, this is where you need leadership from your city administrative levels to bring these ideas into fruition. Instead of just waiting for someone to throw ideas at us. They need to take a lead on this.
Well, isn't it true, though, in Oshkosh that part of the community, though, has traditionally been sort of a drag on development and new ideas? And the argument is, we can't afford that. This is a blue-collar, working-class town. Maybe if we were, whatever, Green Bay or, some other place, that we could afford this. So how are you going to attract those voters? I wonder. I mean, they're going to say you're just one of those tax and spend guys.
My perception, Miles, is not that there's been my perception has been that the city leadership in this community over years perceives any dissent as being opposition. And it just seems to me in small d democracy, you need as much dissent as possible, especially in the early stages of a project. And then, when the project fails, they blame that dissent for it. The people didn't want it. And I think what the people have always wanted in this city is to be communicated with. Explain to us what you're doing. Why are you doing it? How would it benefit us? And I think we've had politicians and unelected bureaucrats in this city who want to be able to pursue projects without any accountability. So I don't think that the people have been a drag, Miles. I really think that's a myth of this community. I think that what's been perceived as a drag has been good, old-fashioned, American, small d democracy. And the city administration, unfortunately, has not responded to that by communicating, by justifying these projects. And I'll tell you something right now, speaking of communicating, there are times as a council person you often have to vote for something that might be unpopular. I will stay with my votes and defend my votes and not run away from them. One thing that saddened me with the garbage fee was the majority of the council bought into the argument that it was needed, and then once the population fought them on it, they then went and ran. Well, I would not have voted for the garbage fee, but if you're going to vote for something controversial, stick with it and fight for it.
Well, that raises an interesting question, though, because there actually were a number of votes against the garbage fee, but they were, you know, 3 different councilors had 3 different perspectives. And
but
so
then
2 of them ended up voting for the fee and 1 voted against it. But there was no, the one thing that seems to happen is that the council never, and maybe it
well,
can't.
the majority of them voted for the budget that included the fee.
Right.
And so the important vote was that budget vote. If you really didn't want that fee, then the right thing to do was to vote against that budget and force the administration to go back to the drawing board. They didn't do that. They should have done that. I would have done that.
Yeah. Because I guess the question is, I mean, if you're elected, how do you avoid being on the end of 6-1 or 5-2 votes? I mean, it seems to me that the city staff is very good at always making sure that, you know, as long as they come out with 5 or 6 votes, you know, they can, you know, tolerate as much dissent.
You've got to do your homework. You've got to be willing to articulate the reasons for your position very clearly. You've got to be able to get people on board to your idea. Everyone's going to be on the 1 or 2 side of a 5-1 and 6-2 vote on occasion. You can't avoid that. But I do think that I have the communication abilities. I think I have the knowledge of city issues to be able to build support for ideas. But I want to say, though, on that garbage fee, I hope the challengers in this council race, myself included, do not let the incumbents run away from their votes. Because there's going to be some attempts to spin that garbage fee as, well, we didn't support it. No, if you voted for that budget, you supported that garbage fee. They can try and run away from that, but they can't hide. And the public knows what's going on here. What was most troubling about that fee to me was the level of work it resulted in this community having to do to get that referendum on the ballot. And it only covers 2007. So we still have no assurance that after 2007 they may not try and reintroduce that. And I'll tell the public right now, I stand firmly against that fee. And another thing I'm very disappointed about, my understanding was that as a result of this chaos involving the garbage, we were going to get more ideas from our city leadership on other ways of collecting garbage, other ways of doing it. Maybe I haven't been following the news closely enough. I haven't seen anything yet.
I think they were looking at an automated system, but that had to be put back for a little bit because of other budgetary constraints, and I think that still is.
But that's the thing. We always, on issue after issue, we always seem to be, well, we'll look at that, we'll get to that, we'll talk about that, but then it never happens.
And I think it's because the council members don't do their homework and don't come prepared to know what's going on.
And don't keep the pressure on the administration. You have to keep the pressure on them.
Right. Downtown redevelopment is still an issue that we hear an awful lot about, Tony, and I'd be curious to know what your opinion is on what needs to be done yet down there, and what can we as a city or city administration and city council do better to promote the downtown as a whole, but also the businesses that are siting themselves there? Or is that not the responsibility of the city, and that's more the responsibility of the Economic Development Corp?
No, it is the responsibility of the city, I think, you know, to at least some extent. I think what we need to do downtown is spend more time listening to the people that are making things happen down there, to the small business owners downtown. We need some kind of summit, I'll call it, at which we call together the business leaders down there. And this should be televised on Oshkosh Cable Access Television. Have these people in their own voice tell the city what they need. What do we need down there to make it thriving? There's so many good little shops down there right now, and yet I don't see how the city is helping them to thrive. And quite frankly, I think our Chamber of Commerce is not doing a good job on this. And I think they need to be encouraged to do more in that direction. But to answer your question, we need to listen more to the small business owners. We need to hear in their own voice what they need. And I think it's got to be done in some kind of what I'll call summit area. There has been a lot of progress made down there, but I'll tell you, when the city so easily allowed Walmart, the superstore, to get put off the highway, you know, when you do something like that, you're almost dooming your downtown business.
Okay.
Now, I understand that there's legalities with trying to keep a Walmart out. I understand all of that. But at the time, there was not one peep from anyone except Melanie Bleckel about the consequences of putting that kind of structure off your highway. When you have, this has happened in city after city. You put a structure like that off your highway, it's going to be tough times for your downtown. But even with that, there's been some good progress down there. I just think we need to hear more from the actual business owners what we need.
Okay. We're down to just a couple minutes. Real quickly, you know, some councilors are pushing for a citywide audit, if you will, of the departments and so forth. It could run as much as $130,000 for a full-scale study. They think that waste can be found and greater efficiencies uncovered. What are your thoughts?
This form of government's got to be based on trust. If we don't trust that our city manager is telling us where fat is in that budget, then he needs to go. If you've got to have a $130,000 study at the same time you're paying over $100,000 for a city manager, something is rotten in Denmark, as they used to say. So I'm firmly against spending that money. What I'm for is higher performance and accountability standards for the manager, and if we're convinced as a council he's not telling us where all the fat is, he needs to go. But to spend another $130,000 something like this, no, no. A waste of taxpayer money, especially since we heard from that Mr. Thompson that we are pretty lean right now, the guy from the Counties Association.
Right, right. Miles, do you have something like that would take about 1 minute for Tony to answer?
1 minute. You always ask me this, and you ask for a simple question. And probably the answer is no.
Okay, well, and I have one. You're not in support of a garbage fee. What fees would you be in support of? Because I know we're going to see some kind of fees at some point down the road.
I want to see our manager put on the table a variety of fees. I can't tell you right now what one I would definitely support. The garbage fee is out. To tell you the truth, Cheryl, I'm only a fan of fees if the taxes then come down. Because if you're raising a fee and the property taxes don't go down, then you're actually raising a tax.
Okay.
So whatever fee gets raised, I want to demand those property taxes go down to match it.
Okay. Well, why don't you take a look into camera 3 there, Tony, and tell folks in about 60 seconds or 45 seconds why they should vote for you on Tuesday, February 20th.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I am Tony Palmeri. I am looking for your vote on Tuesday, February 20th. I want to see a new era of government in Oshkosh, a government that pays attention to all the people of the community, a government that treats everyone with respect, a government that doesn't just pay attention to old boy developers, but pays attention to everyone at every level, whether you're rich, poor, or in between. The theme of this campaign is to hold all levels of city government to higher standards of performance and accountability. I want that. I know you want that. And if you do, I hope you vote for me on Tuesday, February 20th. Tony Palmeri. Thank you.
All right, very good. Thanks so much, Tony. We appreciate it.
Appreciate
and in the next show, we'll have you back in that chair.
Thank you.
We're going to take a short break. When we come back, we'll be joined by Bob Cornell. We'll be right back.
We just escaped.
I escaped.
I escaped.
By foot.
Run across a border.
I couldn't practice my religion.
I was put to work in forced labor camps.
If I stay in Cambodia, I would have been dead by now.
If you think differently, then you're an enemy.
If you know how to read and write, you're dead. You speak your mind, you're dead.
The only way to express what I wanted to do was to get out.
I got to the country when I was about 14 years old.
I was 20.
I was 24.
I came here with nothing. No money, no English.
America stood for freedom, it stands for freedom, and that's what all my generation, young generation, wanted to be there.
For the first time, I felt like I have a right to be on this earth.
Here, you can do whatever you want to do.
I love my life here. I feel at home.
I'm free to do what I want.
Freedom to me means my life.
How you doing?
Hi.
Hi.
Have a nice day.
You too.
Thanks.
If only child abuse were this easy to recognize. If you even suspect abuse, call 1-800-4-A-CHILD. All calls are anonymous and confidential. Trust your instincts.
Poor nutrition today will increase Sarah's chances of anemia, add to her healthcare costs, sick days, even stunt her ability to learn. And the thing is, Sarah's not even born yet. Get proper nutrition before it's too late. Call or visit WIC. WIC provides nutrition information, healthcare referrals, even food. Your child has you, and you have WIC.
And welcome back to the second half of Eye on Oshkosh. We're very pleased to be joined now by Robert Cornell. Bob, as I know him, and I think most people probably do, Bob is seeking his very first time in public office, correct?
Correct.
All right. Well, we're very pleased to have you here, and thanks for coming out tonight. I know you've been sick with the flu, and as long as you don't give it to us, we'll be fine.
We're 6 days past now.
All right, excellent. Well, Bob, why don't we start out, as we do with all of our political candidates, with you telling us and the viewers why you're, throwing your hat in the ring, and a little bit about yourself.
Well, I was born and raised in Oshkosh, outside of spending some time in the Air Force. Worked at the Bonnet Company for over 38 years up in Menasha. When I retired, part of being in the corporate world there is being goal-oriented. And I looked at retirement and what do I really want to do? And I must confess I haven't done everything that I was hoping I would do. But one of the things that always interested me was local government, well, any kind of government, anything in the civics or governmental arena. And obviously when we traveled in our winters, when I first retired, this was not an option because it was just out of town too long. And it was the same thing when I tried to get on any of the boards or commissions. Once I announced that we were no longer going to be traveling in the winter, when Steve Hentz was mayor, he says, fine, we'll get you on a board, and that's when I first met you and got on the Board of Appeals. So I guess you can say it's been a dream. It's certainly been a thought, but at this time, when Shirley Maddox announced that she was not going to seek re-election, I felt that if there was ever a good time to do it, this was the time to do it. Because there's definitely a seat that is not going to be currently held by an incumbent. And I still believe incumbents have a definite advantage. But with an open seat, now's the time to do it. And I've had so much encouragement over the past 2-3 years of why don't you do it? Especially with the garbage fee situation, with the condominium situation. The condo owners have been behind me 100%, and I'm down to the senior center 3-4 times a week, and that's the first thing they always ask, and do you ever think about doing it? Well, you can only get encouraged so much, all right, and then the light bulb really glows, and you say, okay, why not try it?
Okay. Well, good. Well, we're glad that you are.
Yeah.
One thing I just wanted to touch on, you did mention your service on the Board of Appeals, and of course that is where we met, and I have to admit, I don't remember how long we've served together on there. I think it's probably 3 years.
A little over 3, about 3.25 years, something like that.
And obviously if you're elected, you'll have to give that seat up.
I understand.
Which I would miss you there, but I think you'd be a good asset to the City Council. What have you learned in serving on the Board of Appeals that would be carried forward?
Well, I think getting into the ordinances as deep as we do, and of course that's one of my pet peeves, that there are ordinances that I don't think are policeable or enforceable, and but getting to know them as deep as we do, that intrigued me those 3 years. It's great to listen to people, why they want to do something, why they don't want to do something, why they want the variance, and then to be able to sit back and apply the ordinance as we understand it as law, and then either deny the variance or accept the variance and go forth in that direction. I think it's a great background. To me, it's one of the best backgrounds I think you could have in looking at a seat on the council, because you have that wide exposure for those previous years.
I guess the big question, because you haven't been in the public eye that much, is who are you and what are your positions? And one way to frame this might be to say, looking at the current incumbents, are there people that you would find yourself aligning with or against?
Well, I'm not a we and they type person. To me, individual issues should be dealt individually. I can't say that I could not be swayed by good logic from somebody if I have a stand and they can convince me that I've been known to be wrong, and they can convince me that their ideas and their thoughts are the way we should go. I can be convinced of that. But it has to be someone who has done their homework, because I know I'm going to do mine, and someone that can really articulate on any particular item that they want me to understand better than they think I currently do. So if I were to say I'm going to emulate anyone that's there now, I would say absolutely not, because I'm too much of an individual.
Okay. Well, then how about what are the priorities that you think the council needs to get working on?
Well, one of the things that I have a problem with, and I really get concerned with, is not the word, I don't want to use eliminate. Eliminate is too strong a word, but to control wasteful spending. Now, I'm not that naive to know that there will never be wasteful spending in any type of government. But by the same token, if you can cut some of the spending that's in front of you by a reasonable amount in a certain percentage, and you do that with everything you work with, eventually you're going to be at a goal where you've got it more controlled than I think of where it is right now.
Okay. Do you have any specifics? I mean, is it parks? Is it police? Is it streets? Where do you cut?
I think parks is, when you bring up parks, I think that would be one of the specifics, because I think for the size of Oshkosh, and I'm a park type person. My father owned the Miles Company Florist over on the east side, and the city bought all that property when he retired, and it's now Stevens Park. So I guess I have a little heartfelt feeling there for that particular park. But I think for the population of Oshkosh, do we really need all the parks that we have when, I guess basically as a kid, I remember Menominee and South Park, and that was really it. And it satisfied the needs at that time. Now I realize that was quite a few years ago, and it's not going to satisfy the needs today. But I think there's things we can do. I have a problem with the way Menominee Park has been, I guess, I shouldn't say desecrated, but it's been taken apart from the original idea of a park, as far as I'm concerned. I don't think it's a conducive family environment anymore the way it was when I was a kid. And of course, when I was a kid, the park ended on Irving Street. So,
so what are the changes that you think have been detrimental?
First of all, I think there's some of the smaller parks that and I don't know how it would go in the eyes of a developer or somebody who would pick up the property if the city would decide to sell it. But you have to sell things for more than $1 if you want to get rid of them. And if you can get market value out of some of these, I guess, neighborhood parks. And it's not that I'm against neighborhoods. It's just that in today's mode of transportation, and everybody's on the run, why do you have to have whatever the number is when you can consolidate a lot of those things? And I think it'd be a heck of a lot more economical in the long run, just from that particular item.
Okay. What are your thoughts on downtown redevelopment? Because I know that this is still an issue that's talked about a lot. Many people say there still is a lot that needs to be done down there yet. So what do you think needs to be done with downtown? And along with that, Bob, what can we as a city do to help promote not just the downtown, but the businesses that are actually making downtown their corporate home, if you will? Or do you think that that's something that falls back more on the Chamber of Commerce and the Economic Development Corp that's within the Chamber? Well,
I think your latter question there covers it more than the city to go out and do it particularly on its own. I think the city government has to be a part of it. And as far as the downtown is concerned, I've always been in favor of the redevelopment. I think it's a great asset to the city, especially where the area that fronts on the water. I mean, there is so much potential there. And there's so many things that can be done. And there's no doubt in my mind that with the proper direction, and I think today the direction is much better than it has been over maybe 10, 15 years ago, because there was certainly deterioration and things were happening down there that were not good things. When you look at the refurbishing of some of these buildings and bringing them back to their good historical nature, and I think another thing, these apartments above these buildings that have commercial use on the first floor, is just a fantastic idea. Because now you're not only opening that up to the commercial trade, but you've got the residents right there, and not that they're not going to leave any other area. I mean, that would be very naive. But you have a stability, which you don't have without those type of residents up there.
Okay.
Related to downtown is the waterfront. Do you have a specific idea for what the city should be doing with its waterfront?
Well, I like the plan that they have, but I didn't want to really make a comment on the Five Rivers situation, because that was one of my pet peeves as a condo owner. First of all, I felt the people of Oshkosh, and I think members on the council, in my perception, did not really understand what that whole thing was about. Because Oshkosh is not the type of a city that's going to go for luxury condominiums that are going to be bought and leased, and that's basically what it was. Now, where it was located, I thought that was an excellent place, because they could utilize the waterfront, they could have the boating, docking facilities, and I thought it was a great area for the university, because there's a lot of university events that could take place there with that convention type center that they were contemplating, and for the housing, for graduation or anything, when parents are coming in to spend a weekend with their kids or whatever. The location would have been great, but I think the concept was wrong in a condominium venue rather than in a hotel, something of that nature. But for one thing, we don't, outside of Fratello's, what do we have on the river for restaurants? And with all the boating traffic, and you build yourself up as on the Oshkosh on the water, and it's great if you're hungry, but you're not going to find a place to satisfy your hunger. So I think there's a lot of things that can be done in that commercial nature of restaurants. Even and I don't know how many years this goes back, when they were talking about the current plaza area of putting small shops to the south side of that building, and then along the Riverwalk when that would develop. And I thought that was a great idea, because that, I think if people could see the Riverwalk in San Antonio, Texas, you can't help but love the place, and that sort of thing could be developed here.
What's kind of the missing ingredient? I mean, we have this wonderful parcel of land. There have been some ideas floating around. The city's been basically willing to give it away. I mean, is it? I mean, we can't make the financial terms much better. Are we not doing enough marketing, or not finding the right people, or?
Being from a sales and marketing background, a customer service background, I don't think there is enough marketing. I think that's one of the things that the city needs to do better, is to market itself, and then to go out and market what they have to offer. When I look at some of the situations today that have developed through council action, and I listen to people talk about the city and the taxpayer, it's a we-they situation. And you're never going to accomplish anything with a we-they. It has to be us. And I think that's one of the reasons there's a lot of apathy and people not voting or that type of thing. If that can be marketed in some way, and there's always ways to do it, I think that would definitely help the situation as far as making it more attractive and making it more attractive to the taxpayer, which is the thing that has to be done, because it certainly isn't now in a lot of cases.
You mentioned marketing the riverfront and so forth, Bob. I think one of the ways the city has marketed it has been to toss a TIF district out there. What is your position on TIFs?
Well, I think TIFs are great if they're used for the intent that they were originally designed. But to TIF yourself to death is not the way to go. I mean, I might be a little old-fashioned in that approach, but they're great. They've helped They've done a lot of things for the city, and then I look at some of the things that the TIFs had done and the time it takes them to pay off. To me, that's not the way to go 100%. It's a balance, the balance between do they make sense, don't they make sense, and are you going to get a long-term benefit from it? If you're not going to get a long-term benefit from it, well then why would you even want to consider it?
Okay. So you're saying it should be a tool, not the only tool?
Oh, definitely.
Okay.
Anything should be a tool. I don't think there's anything that's black and white. There's probably 1,000 grays in between, and you have to be, in my mind, articulate enough, mature enough to say, this gray looks like it makes the most sense. Then you listen to what the city administration says about it, you listen to what the taxpayers say about it, and then obviously you have to make up your mind, am I on a right gray or should I change my shade a little bit? That's,
Do you think there's not been enough public input and public involvement being sought by city administration on some of these projects? Five Rivers in particular?
That I think was part of, well, it wasn't the total downfall, obviously, but I think that's part of it. When you're spending taxpayers' money for a project of that nature and of that magnitude, if you don't get the input from the taxpayer, they are never going to support it. And if you want the support, well then let's open it up and say, come on in and let's talk about it. And okay, then let the taxpayer make their decisions. The sad thing of that is when you say we'll open it up and bring people in, again we get back to the situation, well, what should I say anything for, because it doesn't make any difference. And I never felt that way. I think if you got something to say, it's logical, it's thought out, say it. You don't have to be right, but at least you expressed another opinion. And as long as we have people expressing opinions, I think on any of those larger projects, the more town hall meetings or the more get-togethers you can have, I think makes all the difference in the world for acceptance.
Well, and I think that you personally have been very instrumental this last year in showing that if you rally enough support amongst the citizens, City Hall really almost has to listen to you. You were instrumental in getting the garbage picked up at condos, as it should have been. So, you know, our hats off to you for that and for proving that people getting involved can make a difference.
Well, that started in 2000 when they first changed the ordinance, and it just amazes me that it took 6 years to get there. But sometimes the wheels move slowly, but you have to keep moving them. So.
That's true. That's true. It strikes me that one of the problems when I watch the council meetings that I observe is that very often the council members are part-time, the staff is full-time. Staff knows a whole lot more about these issues, and I don't know that they're always fully forthcoming in informing citizens or council members. And it seems to me that one of the issues is that the council members, you know, they're busy people, they've got jobs and so forth, don't have the time really to master the issues before they come to the meetings. I'm not sure if you agree with that analysis or not, but let's go with that. The question I have for council candidates is, how much time are you really willing to invest week to week? And I don't want to hear, well, I'll put in as much time as necessary. I mean, how much time do you really have to stay on top of things?
Well, my position is, when I looked at the candidates, they're all working full-time jobs. And that's something that doesn't constrain me. And I will admit I spend a lot of time with our condo association. I've been president of the board of directors for I think 11 out of my 12 years that I've been on the board. Very active in church, down to the senior center 4 days a week. But I think that's all part of the inspiration I have to do this type of thing. And to pick a number, if you were looking for a number, I can't give you a number. And it isn't, and I won't give you the answer as much time as possible, because I understand why you don't want that answer. It's not an answer. So, but I can visit sites. I do the same thing on the Board of Appeals now. If there's something there, if I understand it and it doesn't need a site visit, fine. But I've got the time to go. I can visit the site. I can do the preliminaries, and I have the time to do that as far as a council person would be.
Okay.
But a number, I have no idea, because I'm sure there are times of the year and there are issues where the number is only going to be a number. It could be anywhere from 1 to 1 million, and
Well, the problem is that you could invest in an infinite amount of time
Right.
to learn about these issues. And I know that there's at least one council member who has said, I have this many hours a week, and if there's more going on, I just cut it off. I just can't do anymore.
Well, no, I couldn't do that. That's not my nature. If I take on a task and the task requires more time than I anticipated, I will adjust other things to make sure that I understand what I'm doing and be very articulate in what I'm doing, rather than saying it's got to be done in a 2-hour time frame. If it's not done, that's good enough. That's not my nature.
Mm-hmm. Bob, one of the problems that many people in this community feel we have in Oshkosh is a lack of leadership in our city manager, not really leading the department heads, rather them leading him. There also seems to be a great feeling of a lack of accountability coming from both City Hall and the City Council. Mm-hmm. Do you share either of those beliefs or both of those beliefs? And if so, what would Bob Cornell do if elected to the council to try and restore the accountability, the leadership, the trust?
Well, you know, not sitting in and knowing what the goals and that are set for the city manager by the council when they have their meetings. I think there's always room for improvement in anything. Now, Dick Woliank is a good friend of my two older boys. They graduated from high school together. I've known him for a long time. I will be one of the first to admit I was kind of shocked when he got the job, considering that everybody ahead of him was, I would say, more qualified from a professional standpoint. I think one of the things in leadership is, and I've gone through this in my corporate life, is that once you take a position and your subordinates know they have to report to you on issues, they better know their issues. And there has to be, to me, a master plan. City manager is the CEO. He sets the master plan. And the department heads, he says, okay, your department is going to do this. Well, then in my mind, your department better do that. And not have a department head come in and say, well, we can do 75% of it, but we don't think we can make that 25%. My response would be, what's wrong with the 25%? Maybe my perspective is wrong. Mm-hmm. But I think that's the kind of dialogue you have to have between, quote, the CEO and department heads. And I would say that I don't think I would agree with your original statement that the word on the street is that really doesn't happen. Now, as a council person, and you're representing the entire city because you're at large, you're only aware of what is presented to you. And now I guess how do you dig, one of the questions I have in my own mind is how do you go behind the scenes? And if you have questions, I'm sure they're going to be answered. I've never had a problem with any employee at the City Hall when I've gone down there, whether it's been condominium issues or whatever. Everybody was very friendly, very respectful, and I haven't had a problem with anybody. And I would assume that if there's something I don't understand by the material I'm getting, I can go beyond that material and go to the root of the thing and try to get an answer. And I might be a little naive on that, but I'd like to believe that.
Well, case in point, with respect to maybe department heads kind of leading the charge rather than the city manager. When Five Rivers first came into the media, Dick Woliank was quoted in the paper as, and I don't have the exact quote, but he said something to the effect of he really didn't know that much about it. Don't you think that, and as a counterpoint to that, the Director of Community Development, Jackson Kinney, is the one who really kind of led the whole charge on that. We really didn't hear much at all from our city manager. Mm-hmm. Don't you think a project of that magnitude, $60-some million, the city manager, A, better know something about it before there's an article printed in the paper, especially when he's being contacted for a quote, and B, he should be helping to lead the charge?
He should be leading the charge. On a project of that size, again, I would refer back to being the CEO of the city. Your responsibility is to the citizens, to the taxpayers, and to make the city grow. And to do that, you have to take charge. You have to lead. And if you don't know, how can you lead? Mm-hmm. So I would have a hard time understanding to make a statement that I don't know that much about it, because then that reverts right back to the implications we were talking about, that the show is not being run by the person who should be running it, that it's being led. And that's something would definitely have to be changed as far as I'm concerned.
And I think you would have to have some change, because I'm not sure that under the city manager form of government that he's actually the CEO. There's a difference between an executive and a manager.
Yeah,
executive is truly a leader, a manager, and I think this is what Dick Wallwang says, is I take direction from the council. The council tells me to do things, and whatever they want me to do, I do it. So
but I guess my reference to the CEO is more to the infrastructure of the city employees and the department heads, because he hires them, he fires them, they come through him. You know, if I understand this correctly, if no one, as far as the council is concerned, can go in and say, we don't think this individual is doing his job, you have to fire him. He still has to do it.
Right.
And that's the position that I would put him in relative to the CEO.
But does there need to be a structural change to make it more of a CEO type position, so that it's sort of in the job description that you have to be the leader, not simply the carrier outer of
or make that one of his goals?
That would be a great point as far as I'm concerned. Make it a distinct goal that you're reporting to me, and I'm going to set the ship in this direction. We're all going to go in this direction, and then you tell me how your department is going to get there, and then take it from there.
Okay.
So,
all right, good. We don't have very much time left, and I want to give you a chance to tell folks why they should vote for you. But just very quickly, garbage fees are out for at least the time being. Hopefully we won't see them for any time in the immediate future.
Right.
Are there any kind of any type of fees that Bob Cornell could support should they come down the pike?
Oh, definitely. I am a proponent of fees if they're used for the right purpose. Now, they should not be used for quality of life issues like the garbage was. But for an example, the boat launching fee, the fee at the amphitheater, the fee that I pay when I buy my season tickets at the Grand. I have no problem with any of those. I'm an individual user. I'm using it for my interest. I don't have a problem paying the fee. Those type of fees, when they're for specialized interests, I have no problem. When they get into the type of thing that the garbage was, which is a quality of life issue, there is no need for a fee, and there never should be.
Okay, very good. Why don't you take about 45 seconds, 30 seconds, whatever you feel comfortable with, look into camera 3, tell folks why they should vote for you on Tuesday, February 20th.
Well, I would appreciate everyone's support and during the primary and also during the April election. I've been a resident of Oshkosh for probably more years than I'd care to remember sometimes, but I feel I'm well qualified. I'm a good listener. I can articulate on issues. My background is in sales and marketing and customer service. And I think customer service is a great area of the city of Oshkosh, and I think as part of a council, I could use all that background material to definitely satisfy the needs of the voters of the city of Oshkosh. So I ask for your support during both of those elections.
All right, very good. Thanks so much for being here, Bob.
Well,
and we'll see you if you make it through the primary. We'll see you in round 2.
Okay, very
Miles,
good.
thanks to you. And as always, thanks to you for letting us into your homes for the last hour. We'll see you next time. Until then, take good care. Keep your eye on us. We've got our eye on Oshkosh.